Welcome to the Art of Listening to Your Body podcast. My name is Jin Ong and I'm your host. I practice as an osteopath and psychosomatic therapist and am fascinated by the mind-body connection and how your physical body is a manifestation of your emotional state. I help people get unstuck from their chronic pain and live the life they want, grounded in values and driven by purpose. My aim is to create awareness to the underlying emotions behind pain, injury, and disease in the body. Join me to learn more about the story of your body, what different issues may indicate, how to release emotions so that you can prevent problems, as well as inspiring pain story interviews. Carol is co-founder of Asha Blooms, a handcrafted purposeful jewellery company dedicated to acknowledging, inspiring, and uplifting women. Each piece of jewellery is tied to an intention to help women see themselves for who they already are, whole, complete, and powerful. She launched her business together with her husband after her walk with secondary infertility. We'll dig deep into her journey with infertility and how she believes her thoughts helped shape the process and outcome. This has led Carol to lead a more intentional life every day she wakes up. Welcome, Carol. Thank you so much for joining me. Can you let us know where you're from?
Thank you so much for having me, Jen. I am from Seattle, Washington.
Awesome. What's going on in the States at the moment for you?
We've actually had a bit of bad air from some fires in Washington State as well as California. So in addition to COVID and social distancing, we've also had to really be at home, not go outside because it's actually unhealthy air quality. So it's been a little bit of a challenge.
Yep. I think we've all experienced this quarantine and we're just having to adjust. And now you've got the fires. I didn't know there was fires going on in Seattle.
Yes.
All right. So tell me a little bit about yourself and what you get up to in life.
Yeah. So I have a purposeful jewelry business. It's called Asha Blooms. All the pieces have a meaning behind it, and it goes with the property of the gemstone or whatever the pendant looks like. And I started the business out of my journey with secondary infertility. So I've been doing the business for about 2 years now.
Great. And do you hand make everything yourself?
I do. So right now we're concentrating just on necklaces. So I make all the necklaces myself. I don't cut the gemstones because that would be a far more labor-intensive process. So all of the pendants are purchased as ethically as possible, of course, but I do hand make all of the pieces.
Beautiful. And I'm always curious, before you did that, because you're obviously passionate about it, what did you do beforehand?
Yeah, so before I worked in advertising for about 12 years, and that was a good career. I had a path to follow in terms of following a corporate ladder. But my heart really drew me to more mission-focused work. I mean, I had been a volunteer off and on for 14, 15 years. And so I took a leap of faith shortly after I got married, and I took a huge pay cut and I went into the nonprofit industry. And I was there for 1 year, and that was the year I got pregnant with my first child. So I did not return after maternity leave.
Mm-hmm. And how many years ago was that?
Gosh, that was several years ago. I think that was about, she's 7, so 8 years.
Great. And are you much happier doing what you're doing now?
I am. I definitely am. I mean, it's working for yourself, I think it's not easy. It is not for the faint of heart at all. I actually do think it is far easier to go to a job where in the States, your job is tied to health benefits, unfortunately. And so that's kind of a weight lifted off your shoulders just to have that sort of stability and that peace of mind. But I think as far as personal fulfillment goes, I'm far more fulfilled. It's super challenging, of course. I think it's very difficult to do, but the upside is there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you do something that you're really passionate about, then that's when you do live a healthier life and you can overcome stresses and challenges a lot easier, especially when you've got that bigger vision.
Absolutely, I agree 100%.
Yeah. So you have an interesting journey towards what has led you to what you're doing today with your purposeful business and your jewelry design. And it's around fertility and infertility, which I find really fascinating. Um, as a practitioner, when I see women who desperately want to have a baby sometimes, things can go completely out the window. Everything going on around them in their external life, and they are just so focused on having this baby. However, you had your first baby that was conceived quite easily. Can you
Mhm.
just share a little bit about your secondary infertility?
Absolutely. So the secondary infertility, and I did not even know that that was terminology until I became engulfed in that world, came as such a shock. You know, everything about my first pregnancy was so easy and so seamless. The minute we said, hey, let's do this, we conceived on the first try. So we were super lucky. I had a very uneventful, very textbook pregnancy itself, which is what you want. Um, it is interesting though, now that I look back and I think about, when with my first child and I tried to visualize the actual delivery, I was actually unable to. I was afraid, I was fearful. I just could not get into the mindset of my body can handle it. And I find it super coincidental, very interesting, just such it's almost unbelievable that that delivery, of which I had had zero, pregnancy complications, ended up with me having an emergency cesarean. Um, Looking back, I actually don't think it was coincidence, and I'm not blaming myself in the least, of course, but I think, and this kind of ties back to what I do now for a living, but I definitely think it's all connected. Your thoughts, your body, your mind, wellness, all of that is interconnected. And I was, um, back then, unable to really see that connection. So I had the baby. It was very scary. I'm, wheeled off to the operating room. They thought I had placental hemorrhage, which is, if that was the case, the baby may have been lost. But she lived, of course, and everything was fine. And I got to come home and all was well. Um, the thing though is after I came home, because it was such a traumatic experience for me, I actually remember looking to my husband and saying, God, I am never doing that again. That that was it's not even the physical pain, but it was so consuming and so emotionally draining and so scary. I just thought, I'm spent. We are one and done. We are just not going to get pregnant again. I'm not going to do it.
Mm. Can I
And
ask
he,
something
yes.
about the fears that you had? Where do you think the fears came from around the birth? Do you have things like hypnobirthing or calm birthing in the States over there? Did you do any prep with midwives?
Yeah, so I did know prep with midwives. We do have midwives, but I don't think it's super common. I think most people go to the hospital or to a hospital typically, and their baby is delivered, um, typically by a obstetrician. I did have a birth plan. I did go to a few birthing classes, but I did not do any hypnobirthing. I didn't think I was going to have a home birth. I didn't think I was going to birth in water. I think, truthfully, when I look back, I just think I was so afraid of the delivery for some reason. I
Hmm.
don't know what it was.
Hmm.
Um, and I do find it just what a synchronicity it is that I didn't actually have, a quote natural delivery. I had a cesarean. I find that just such an oddity almost because I couldn't imagine it for myself. And I don't know exactly what I was fearful of,
Yeah.
but there was fear there,
Yeah.
definitely fear. And I think, when they were running with me down the hospital corridor to the operating room, and I remember looking at all the lights on the ceiling, white, white, dark, passing the lights. And I just remember saying a prayer like, please, God, let us live. Like, let us live. That was the only thing I had. Like
Mm.
that was my only strength kind of in that moment. And of course, all was okay. It was not a placental hemorrhage. I did have unexplained bleeding, but we were okay
Yeah.
at the end of it.
So did you feel like you might have died in that process? That was a fear for you going down the hall.
Yes, yes, it was a fear for me.
Yeah.
And might I add, so this probably plays a little bit into it too. So the first person I thought of in that scenario, so keep in mind, it's me. I'm in my mid 30s, first baby, no complications. The first person that I thought of to make it and not die was myself. I didn't think of the baby at first, and I think that stems from the fact that I had a late sister. She had passed away. I mean, now it's been over 10 years, but at that time it had been a few years. And when I remember going down the corridor, and I just remember thinking, please let me live so my mother doesn't have to experience the loss of another child.
Mm.
And it wasn't even about me, it was about my mom in
Mm.
that moment. I distinctly remember that. And then I thought of me and my husband kind of equally. And then I thought of the baby.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because and I'll get into the story, but I had had the secondary infertility, and I had had complications with having my second baby. And for that emergency delivery, the first person I thought of was the baby.
Mm.
Um, Fascinating kind of when you sit back and take it all in.
Yeah, that is really interesting. I'm glad that we got into that backstory.
Yes.
All right, let's go into the next part that I interrupted you on.
Yes. So I told my husband, I'm not doing this again. We're not going to have another baby. And he said, he didn't really say anything. I think he just thought we would have another kid. Of course, we would add to the family. And I was just maybe having, an emotional time. And of course, 3-4 months down the road, I fell madly in love with my daughter. Um, Madly in love to the point where 4 months in, I thought, let's try for a second baby. It was too soon because of, the cesarean and just kind of all of it. So my husband said, let's just wait a little bit longer. So we did. We waited a few more months. So maybe around month 9 or 10, we started trying for a second baby. Nothing was happening. Nothing happened for several months. And at this point, I think I knew in my heart and soul that something more was going on than just it being like a little bit of time to have the second child. I just felt like there was something more.
Yeah. Can you take me through what was going on in your mindset month after month, not getting pregnant? Because obviously you need to wait till you get your period. And sometimes that can be a reminder of the fact that you're not actually pregnant. And that can sometimes send women into a bit of a downward spiral, feeling of failure in their body. And yeah, emotionally, it's quite taxing. So can you talk through what was going on through your head?
Absolutely. You hit it. I felt all of that. I felt like a failure. I felt like my body was failing me. I felt like I had failed my body. I felt like I felt sorry for myself. Everywhere I looked, there were other people and celebrities getting pregnant who were far older than myself. And I was angry. Why them? Why not me? What is wrong with me? Is it my, destiny or fate, just to have the one child? And are we destined to just be a family of three? You kind of have these conversations in your head where you blame yourself, then you get mad, then you feel sorry for yourself. And it's kind of this endless cycle of being a hamster on a wheel and you just can't get off.
Mm.
So I was down, I was depressed. I felt better when I did things. And I use that kind of loosely, but if I heard like an inspiring story from someone, or I read something in the news where someone was able to get pregnant after a year, 2 years, and they completed their family, that would kind of lift my spirits for a little bit.
Mm.
Um, I did clean eating. I did all these kind of little tricks just by myself, just to see if they would help. But nothing really was working. And in between that time of us saying, green light again, let's go for child two, to the time I actually visited a fertility clinic, I had had one miscarriage.
Mm-hmm.
So that, you're happy and then you're sad, and it's kind of grief all over again. And it definitely takes the toll.
Yeah. Did you have multiple miscarriages or just the one?
In between that time, just the one.
Yeah.
And then I did actually go visit a fertility clinic because I had had some labs done by my OBGYN. And when she called me, she said, I'm so sorry to tell you this, but your AMH levels are very low. There's nothing I can do for you. She was very matter of fact, as one probably should be, just giving kind of that clinical advice or
Can you just describe
numbers.
what AMH is for people who don't know?
Oh, sure. The anti-Müllerian hormone. What does it do? I'm not quite sure, but all I knew was it should have been at a 1 or higher, and I was at like a 0.01 or something very, very low for my age. And at this point, I am 36 or 37. I don't remember how old I am, but kind of mid, getting to the late 30s. So I'm an older person trying to have this baby, but I'm not anywhere near menopause. I'm just kind of in this spot. And I should say I had my first child in San Francisco, where there's just a lot of people who are like me, who had babies kind of in their mid to late 30s. So I felt very much right on track. But of course, when you go to the fertility clinic, they remind you, kind of tongue in cheek, that you are a geriatric person for pregnancy.
Yes. The power of words.
Oh, I know. I wish they would
word.
come up with different wording. I guess they do. Advanced maternal age, AMA.
All right.
There you go. So going back, my OBGYN said, there's nothing I can do for you, Carol. I think if you want to go down this path of the fertility journey, you're going to have to see a fertility specialist, so an endocrinologist. I cannot do anything for you further. So I did. I made an appointment at a clinic, and so began my 2+ years of that journey. And 2+ years is very short for the fertility world. I mean, I personally know women who've been in it or on their own journeys for 5 to 10 years. So comparatively speaking, mine was short, but taxing no less.
Yeah.
And I'd like to add that the diagnosis I was given was diminished ovarian reserve. So I had smaller egg quantity, and they suspected the quality was not as good as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so throughout that, kind of that walk with the secondary infertility, I did rounds of IVF. I did them back to back. I did get pregnant a few times. One of the pregnancies, as luck would have it, though, there was a baby. There was a viable heartbeat. I saw the heartbeat on the screen, but there was a problem. The baby was too close to my previous cesarean section scar in utero. It was a millimeter away. And they thought it was not viable. So that sent me on a little bit of a find to like a radiologist and some other specialists. They wanted to make this decision collectively with other experts, basically so it wasn't all on them, and also to see if there's a way we could save the baby, but there wasn't. Every expert who came in said, I'm so sorry, but it's not a viable pregnancy because of the location. So we are going to have to terminate. And I felt such devastation is not even the right word. I just felt so cheated. I went through all of this stuff, and for us to have a viable but not viable pregnancy just felt like the world came crashing down. And so I had to terminate, and we did that process. And of course, I had some complications, and that led me to a procedure in the operating room where I was bleeding uncontrollably, and I was blood transfusion level. And the surgeon came in and said, if this doesn't work because you're bleeding too much at this point, we are going to have a hysterectomy. And you're going to have to figure out the baby piece later, whatever that means, but being as a doctor, like I have to save your life. And like there was no question to them. And so thankfully the intervention worked, and I was able to save my uterus, which allowed me to carry again. So by this point, I've had some losses. I've had some pretty stressful interventions, surgeries, and just my emotional state is not good. I'm down in the dumps. I'm trying to be present for my daughter. I'm trying to be there for my husband. I'm trying to kind of put on this happy face to the outside world. But really, I'm crushed inside. I'm dying because all I want is just to add to the family. It's not like I'm asking for a lottery ticket or to like get this crazy car or like to do anything else. I'm trying to do something that's, quote, basic, which is procreate. And I'm having to resort to science. And that, in the States anyway, it's expensive. So you can have health coverage cover some. And we did have that piece, thankfully. So we were lucky in that regard. But also you have to pay out of pocket. And so all of this is kind of going on.
Can I ask about the impacts on your family with you feeling the way you did? Were you talking to anybody about this process, or did you feel like you couldn't talk to anyone about it because they didn't understand? And what was going on between you and your partner and your daughter as well on the emotional level? What was the strain on your relationship?
Sure. Yeah. So I think my husband felt a lot of the strain. I think he felt like he had to be the one to kind of hold it together for all of us because I was his rock. So if he crumbled at any point, I think he thought that would send me into kind of a tailspin. So every time I spoke to him, and by nature, he's very even keeled, he's analytical, he is kind of a rock. And I'm much more of the feeler, the deep feeler, much more emotional, sentimental, those kinds of things. So we're kind of at opposite ends of the spectrum. But I think it did take a toll on him. I mean, one can only be one's rock for so long. And truthfully, he had his own journey with it. Because even though it was my body and all the drugs I was taking for the IVF and all of it, he's the father. Like it's still a journey for him too. So I think he had to come to some sort of internal, resolution where maybe he put on a face for me. Like I felt like I was putting on a face for my kid. So kind of everyone is protecting the next person down the line. I did feel like I could talk to him. I did feel like I could talk to a few friends. I did at certain points speak to a fertility therapist, and I thought that was very helpful. She framed it in a way that has always stuck with me. She said, after 2.5 years in, she said, Carol, what you're experiencing is hard and it's awful. And it's awful because it's like it's chronic. So it's just kind of this ongoing devastation that you feel, where you feel, a procedure has worked and then it doesn't, or like maybe you're pregnant for a little bit and then you're not. And it's just this ongoing thing where to the outside world, you present, normal, and there's nothing hurt on my body. I'm not walking around in a cast or a wheelchair. There's nothing physical, but the inside is just a bunch of turmoil. And when she said the word chronic, for some reason, it just validated everything for me. And I just thought, wow, someone who really understands. I did try to, like I said, talk to friends, and that was helpful. But I really think people won't fully understand until they've been in it themselves. It's just one of those things.
Yeah.
You can try. But it's hard. They have their own lives. They're busy. They have work and their own families, and they have their own social lives. And, it's hard to always uplift someone who's not that I was a Debbie Downer, but whose conversation would ultimately always come back to, well, something else didn't work out, or after a couple years, it becomes draining.
Yeah.
And as for my daughter, I think I could have done a better job. She's little. She's still a toddler. Because we started before she turned 1. So at around ages 2 and 3, I think she fully grasped that I was sad sometimes. And I mean, if I could do it all over again, I would have just been more present and allowed time to like focus on her and whatever activity we were doing, and then allow time maybe by myself to like really grieve instead of trying to suppress everything down.
Yeah. It's a fairly all-consuming process financially and just with all the appointments as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Without a doubt. Yeah. And so, after a little bit of time, I did get pregnant. Thank you, science, by way of science, with my son, Henry. And that was wonderful. But I have to say that pregnancy was just filled with so much anxiety, just so much.
Is it because
I had
effort went into having this baby, into having Henry?
Say that one more time, Jen.
Is it because there was so much effort that went in behind conceiving Henry?
Yes, because there was so much effort and I felt like so much was on the line. And I also felt like this was kind of the last resort for us. Like I felt like if I couldn't do this with my own body, I was not going to attempt again. I was really tired. I was drained. I just couldn't do it anymore. And when I was pregnant with him, though, I'd had some bleeding. And so every time there's like a spot of blood, and that's just the thing, every time you go to the bathroom, so this is multiple times a day, you're always searching for that drop of blood. And when you see it, your heart sinks and everything comes back up again. All of that grief and all of the anxiety of like, oh God, are we not going to make it? Is this baby not going to make it again? And there was an episode, when I was around 13 weeks pregnant with him. I remember going to the bathroom and I stood up and there was a gush of blood, and it was so much bleeding. We went to the emergency room, and while we were there, and I brought a trash bag with me to sit in the car, so like not to soil the car. And I have it with me in the emergency room. We finally get admitted to a room of our own. And I remember having this urge to pass something. And I passed something, and it looked to me at the time like a fetus. And I lost it. I lost it in the room. And of course, we were traveling for Thanksgiving, so we weren't even home. And the nurse came in and she said, "What is it?" And I showed her. So she took it and she said, we're going to figure this out for you. But I remember at that point, I let go and I did a full surrender and I just said, "We are done. I'm at the end of my line. I've tried everything that I can. Clearly, I've passed the baby. I cannot do this anymore." And I'm just on the bed, crying. My husband is with me. You're in such a vulnerable emotional state. And then they eventually wheeled me to a different room where they did an ultrasound. And as luck would have it, they said, "I'm going to call your husband in right now." And they said, "There's the baby." Mm-hmm. So I actually have no idea what I passed, what that tissue was. I don't know. All I know, though, was in that time, it was so scary and just so consuming. You put all of your hopes into this and to think it's not going to work out, but then it does. It's like, it's very emotional. The roller coaster is very emotional. And I remember from that point on, 13 weeks to the time I delivered my baby, telling everyone and anyone who would ask me about the baby, I just remember saying, "I do not care what they do to me. I do not care if they have to put me under and they put that thing over my nose. I do not care. All I care at the end of the day is to have a baby that's healthy and alive. That's my only wish, a healthy and alive baby." Fast forward, and what happens? I get diagnosed with IUGR during the pregnancy, which is intrauterine growth restriction. So he's small. They think he's small because of the former procedure to save my uterus. The gels that they use, they think, have prevented maybe proper blood flow to the baby who's now growing. So every week we go in, it's like, "Oh, he's 4th percentile, 3rd percentile, 1 percentile. We're going to admit you because he keeps getting smaller, and we're going to have you stay here until you deliver." So I go, and 2 nights later, they wake me up and they've lost the baby because I'm on continuous monitoring. So 24 hours a day, except when I have to use the restroom, they have nodes on my stomach to monitor the baby's heartbeat. And they couldn't find him. So they make a decision pretty fast because they're searching for him. We've got to get this baby out because they are afraid. I later learned that it was fetal demise. So I go into the operating room and I just remember once again praying. This time I prayed for the life of my baby. I did not care what happened to me. And I just remember praying and saying, "Please let this baby be alive." And a nurse held my hand and she said, "We're going to put you under, and when you wake up, you're going to have your baby." And I remember the room being so filled with anxiety. You could smell it in the air. It was very thick. A lot of people in there, because I'm at a teaching university where I delivered. The doctor says, "I've got the knives ready." Like, she says this twice because she's nervous. Like, you could just feel it. And I remember counting back and just saying, "Please let him live." And of course I wake up, hours later. And by this time they called my husband, because I was alone because it all happened in the middle of the night. And I remember waking up and he says, "Henry's okay. He's in the NICU, but he's okay." Mm-hmm. And so that is kind of the story of that journey.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing. But I feel there's a bit more.
Thank you.
We'll go into it a bit more.
Of course.
So at how many weeks was he born?
He was born at 27 weeks. He was born at 33 weeks.
Okay. And how long did he spend in NICU?
He was there for 23 days. Mm-hmm. So not very long.
Yeah. And when you were getting wheeled in for the second time to have a cesarean, because were you planning or hoping for a vaginal birth?
No, I think at this point, because of all the interventions and things that had happened to me, they had prepped me for a cesarean.
Yes. Okay. And do you feel like your previous experience with your daughter having that cesarean, where it was quite anxiety filled as well and unexpected, did that come into the second cesarean?
It did. And in a way, I actually feel like my daughter's birth and that delivery prepped me for this delivery. I feel like if it had been the other way around, where I had had this more traumatic and dramatic experience, I I believe I would have gone into some sort of postpartum psychosis
Mm-hmm.
because of the depth of what it was. But I was so much better able to handle baby number two, his delivery, I think because of the experience with my daughter.
Yeah. And how was your recovery and that postnatal period with Henry?
Much better.
Okay.
Yeah, much better. Everything was better the second time. And I think it's because I knew what to expect.
Mm-hmm.
I knew he was in the best place he could be. Um, I felt more at peace
Yeah.
with it than I did with the first.
Mm. And can you go into a little bit more about how you were feeling? Because there was just so much weight on having this baby and having a healthy baby. And then you had the healthy baby. Then what went through your head?
Um, I think what went through my head was, please let him thrive in the NICU. He was born just shy of 4 pounds. He was 3 pounds, 14 or 15 ounces. And I just remember thinking, baby boy, you have got to drink. Like you've got to fatten up because you are so tiny. He was half the weight of my first child, who I thought was fairly small too. Um, but that was kind of like the next mode of not attack, but kind of the next mode that we went into, which was all about feeding the baby. I mean, I went to the NICU every day, sometimes twice a day to nurse, to pump. Um, and I couldn't even, you could hold him, but he was unable to nurse for a little bit because he was so small.
Mm-hmm.
So all of that kind of energy, I would say all of the joy of bringing home a newborn was not joyful because he wasn't home and he was so small. But I knew intellectually he was in the best place he could be, and I'd much rather him be there than at home with us where we had none of the equipment
Mm.
because he was obviously monitored 24 hours a day, multiple nurses on hand. I mean, he was in a great place. But as a parent, the worry never leaves.
Yeah. And how old is he now?
He's doing great now. You know, he is three right now. He's so spirited. He's got so much energy. He's at an extremely healthy weight. I mean, he's bigger than kids who are older than him. You would never know by looking at him that he was born early or small or had any kind of anything. You would never know it.
Mm. And through that experience, you reflected on it. And can you delve into what it is you felt you learnt from both of those pregnancies and births, especially around your
You
thought?
know, absolutely. It really was so ultra clear to me, clear as day, that what you think matters. How you speak to yourself matters. Um, Positivity matters. Looking for the hope matters. You know, reframing a situation, no matter how devastating it may be, if you're able to kind of find the opportunity or a silver lining in something, it will help you move forward. I think, I think I've mentioned to you earlier that every morning I wake up and I have an intention for the day. I
Because this particularly
I do.
goes back to, you were saying, I don't care what happens, what they have to do, if they have to put me under. And that's afterwards you realized, well, that's what I said and it came true, so that there is power
Yes,
behind your words. So, sorry, you wake up in the morning and you have more specific intentions now.
yes, more specific intentions. Just, some of it's more general, some of it's more specific, but I feel like I'm thoughtfully choosing my thoughts, um, if that makes any sense at all. So instead of just saying, I don't care about this as long as X happens in the end, well, I do care.
Yeah.
I do care a little bit about the process. And I do, obviously, I'm looking for a specific outcome, in terms of my goals and what it is that I'm going for. But I'm looking for the journey. So, like the experience to, I'm looking for that as well.
Yeah. And did you work with any other therapists apart from the fertility specialist and the fertility therapist during that time?
I did work with a fertility acupuncturist. I did do fertility yoga. I did do fertility meditation. And I loved all of these three services. Like, I love them. I felt like they offered me something that I otherwise would have never explored. And it did bring me peace and hope at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. And have you continued any of those practices, but in a varied form, because you're not aiming for fertility anymore? Have you brought meditation or self-care into your regular routine?
Yes, yes. So I meditate on a regular basis. And that helps me because it helps bring me kind of with the whole intentionality of it. It helps bring me peace, and I feel calmer, so I feel better. I do yoga, and then I've also added some strength training to my, I guess you would call it my wellness routine. Um, so I actually see such benefits just in terms of like a physical standpoint of doing those things. I feel better. I'm in a better mood. I'm lighter. I'm eating better. Um, so yeah, I feel like I've had so many gifts from the experience of the fertility journey. I mean, so many things that have come up to the surface that I would have never explored or been privy to before.
Yeah.
So in a way, I'm grateful.
What are the other things that have come up for you because of that process that maybe we haven't covered?
Yeah, well, the first thing that I can think of is just so many things. So living life on my own terms. This kind of goes in with the intentionality, but just living life that is true to me and authentic to me and what speaks to me and my knowing. So before, when I was in the corporate world, I did it because I thought that was what was expected of me. I wanted to have, a stable job. I wanted to climb this ladder and make a certain amount of money. And I did it. And that was great. But it never felt authentic. It never felt like home, if that makes any sense. It just never felt peaceful. Um, and I felt like I was doing kind of that job to show my mom stability. And I guess what the experience of infertility has taught me is you've got to live life on your own terms. Like, you have to stop being afraid. And even if you're afraid, because now I know the fear never goes away, but you can take small steps forward to do them anyway. And that's actually one of the reasons why I started this business together with my husband. It's been a leap of faith. We both have the corporate background, but and jewelry was never a part of my life growing up. It's not like I made jewelry when I was little. It's not like it was a part of me, but it kind of fell into my world and both of our worlds, I would say. And doing that has been such a big learning from a personal growth perspective, from a relationship perspective. I mean, it's been quite phenomenal, I would say. It's been hard as well.
Yes.
As any entrepreneur would say, but it's for the journey and what you're going to learn along the way.
Yeah. And you'll never know if you don't try.
Exactly.
Can I ask what your ethnicity is, your cultural background?
Yeah, absolutely. So my mother is Korean and my father is, he's American, he's white, with ties to Poland. That's where his ancestral roots go. So my parents met in South Korea. My mom worked on base, and my dad was in the Air Force. My sister was born there and I was born in the States.
Mm-hmm.
So she came here in the 70s and she has an accent and she's all about, I'm a product of her upbringing and I'm a product of, you have to go to college, you have to get a stable job, you can't rock the boat too much. Since you're not a doctor, engineer, or lawyer, you've got to figure something else out. I mean, I've heard it all. And that my husband also kind of has a similar story. His dad is Indian from India. His mom is white American and her ancestral roots are mostly Swedish. They met when he was studying in grad school for, his engineering degree. And so his dad also came here in the 70s. His dad has an accent. English is not his first language. Both parents married out of their race and they did, something quote taboo for that time period. And I think that is actually why we connected, Amr and myself, because we are both products of that environment and we have our own stories of kind of being other or mixed race where you don't quite gel, in one community. You have 2 feet on both sides of the border, so to speak. And he too was taught, because his dad was an engineer. Well, you're not a doctor, lawyer, or engineer, so you got to figure something else out. But anyway, so we're forging our path
Yes.
and doing it our own way.
Yeah, I wanted to ask that because I think it's really strong, the Asian culture, and sometimes what you have to divert away from. So either you can follow in your parents' footpath or footsteps, or you can change it. And sometimes there are those elements of proving yourself if you're not going to be the doctor, lawyer, accountant. Or
yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you may have some experience with that too.
Yeah, both my parents are Malaysian Chinese and immigrated from Malaysia to Australia. And my husband's Irish. And I always remember my mum going, "Why don't you find a nice Chinese boy?" And I'm like, "No, thanks." So our daughter
I love it.
Embraced.
I love that.
Thanks for going into that. My other question is around, typically people think of grief as loss or death of a loved one, a family member, but people don't often think of that when it comes to miscarriages and abortions. And when I see clients, this is now a question that I will often ask my female clients or even the male, their partners, around, well, okay, so pregnancies. It's not about how many children you have, how many pregnancies did you have? And sometimes people will have 11 pregnancies and 1 or no children. And I often ask, how do you feel about that? And have you done any work on that? Because miscarriages and especially abortions and terminations can be surrounded by a lot of shame and people don't talk about them, or they don't talk about them because they don't want people to feel sorry for them because they want to move on with trying to get pregnant. So I will go through processes with my clients where let's go back and just see, do you have any stored emotion and trauma surrounding this? And I get them to go back and talk to the baby that is not here today. So the one that was aborted, terminated, or miscarried. And some people are absolutely fine going back and there's nothing there and it's great. We just move on. But sometimes people are so unaware that they still have carried so much emotion and not shifted the grief around that loss and never think to talk to something that has never come to life and be in physical form in front of them, but actually find it so liberating just letting that emotion go. So I'm curious, did you do any work like that or have you felt any need to?
That's such a great question. I had not done any work with those pregnancies that did not make it. I've been pregnant 7 times in total. So the last pregnancy is the one that made it through. But I often wonder who they were. Were they a boy? Were they a girl? What would they have been like? Would they have looked like my daughter? Like I have a lot of, not a lot, but from time to time, I have things that come up for sure.
Hmm. It could be a process that if you want to take yourself through in your own time, you just have conversations with each of them. And there's some beautiful conversations that I hear my clients have in front of me with the babies that never made it. And
Mm-hmm.
even going as far as having them talk back to them and tell them what they think they would have been like. And also that process of letting go.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Is there anything else that you would like to share with us today?
Um, I don't think so. I think we kind of hit everything.
Great. And so, how can people find you if they want to get in
Yeah,
touch or follow your amazing jewelry work?
yeah, absolutely. They can just hop on over to the website. It's ashablooms.com. Find me on Instagram at Asha Blooms or on Facebook at Asha Blooms Jewelry.
Where does the name Asha Blooms come from?
Yeah, so Asha means hope in Hindi and life in Swahili. And we really wanted a word for we wanted a word that could be heard in more than one language, as both Amr and myself hail from multi-ethnic backgrounds. And then we wanted a word that literally meant hope. Um, so when people wear the jewelry, they can feel that energy of the hope or the wellness that it represents.
Yes. What does your husband do in your business? Does he create as well?
No, he doesn't create. So we have very distinct roles. He does everything on the back end. He takes care of the website, all of the listings. It's so much work just to put one product up on a site. So you've got SEO, um, the photography, the graphics, the taxes, the accounting, just
All
all
the
of
masculine
all of the non-fun stuff.
You're the feminine and he's the masculine in the business.
Very much. Yes.
That's a good compliment. And you've got a special offer for anyone who's listening.
Yes, yes. I'd love to offer your audience 20% off their first order with Asha Blooms, no minimums. Um, all they have to do is come to the website and enter in their email address, and then they get a code in return.
Perfect. Do you do commission pieces as well?
Sometimes it just depends on what it is.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing with me and my audience today. I really appreciate the insights into the fertility and infertility journey. Very grateful for you sharing.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Thanks for tuning in to today's Pain Story interview on the Art of Listening to Your Body podcast. Anything shared during this episode is for information only. It does not replace professional advice from a healthcare practitioner. If you are experiencing pain, injury, or illness, seek advice that is catered to your individual needs. Thanks for learning with me on the Art of Listening to Your Body podcast. If you like what you've heard, I would love if you could rate, review, and share with your friends. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram. My handle is The Art of Listening to Your Body. You can join my free Facebook group where I go live regularly to teach you about different conditions and the deeper underlying emotions at play.